My question is related to this supply chain issue. And I'm sure everyone on the screen went through the experience back in, April, March, where we were just desperately trying to get a hold of masks and gowns and gloves and very basic things. And I remember very clearly being on the phone with Chinese middlemen in the middle of the night, just trying to get some KN95 masks for our healthcare workers who were using things like scuba equipment in order to protect themselves as they intubated patients and whatnot. And then I remember very clearly when we got our portion of the strategic national stockpile. It was a lot less than what we thought. We opened it up, it was moldy and expired. And for us in Michigan, I feel like we've been talking about how when you outsource supply chains, particularly on sensitive issues, on sensitive items, like it's going to come back to bite you. And I feel like it bit us. So the question is, we have the president at the White House today announcing a new kind of Made in America supply chain review. For Ms. Clowers, can you just go through in specific terms what additional steps we need to take to, if not bring back some of that supply chain to the United States, at least regionalize it so we're not dependent on countries we have sometimes mixed relationship with, like China? What can the Defense Production Act and Buy American requirements in the government do to actually bring those supply chains home or make us less vulnerable?
Yes, this is an issue that we've been tracking for about 9 months now because, as you note, it's been a persistent challenge from right at the beginning, from the lack of supplies. And what we saw was that domestically there was a insufficient amount of supplies on hand, or in some cases they were outdated. The supplies were unusable. In terms of what can we do going forward, we've called for a few things, including better clarifying the roles and responsibilities of all the different players. Again, we saw that confusion in terms of who was going to be providing what and how to get that supplies that were needed. And I should note that this isn't surprising because in the fall of 2019, the government conducted a pandemic exercise. And through that exercise, they found some of the key findings was that we had insufficient supplies and that we were going to have confusion and that it was going to lead to needed gaps. And in terms of going forward, so we've called for clarifying the roles, assessing what gaps exist now, but also looking ahead to try to get ahead of this a little bit, both, 6, 12 months, and also looking into the next pandemic. We do want to be looking at all the tools that are being used from the Defense Production Act and other tools that we might be able to bring to bear in terms of financial incentives. And two other quick points I'll make on the financial incentives, especially in the area of medical countermeasures. We've been, as we've noted, the vaccine development, we were successful this time in terms of getting a vaccine developed within a year. But that's an inherently risky process that's very costly. Most medical countermeasures actually fail, and so we need to incentivize companies to work in this area, conduct the R&D necessary. And then finally, really examining the role of the strategic national stockpile. Is it to be a frontline defense or a backstop? People need to have an understanding of what they can count on from the strategic national stockpile so state and locals can plan.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the truth is Democrats and Republicans all talk about this, right? It's like a really common message that people are saying after the year that we've lived through. But what I have failed to see is actual action, right? We all know we got to look at gaps, we got to coordinate better. But what are we going to do to actually incentivize that production to be made here? That's going to take breaking some China for how our system works. And Mr. Chairman, I would offer we could do maybe a bipartisan letter or something, particularly to DHS, to talk about our concern about this and urge them forward so that we get beyond this idea that we're all concerned and we actually start seeing changes in how they procure at places like DHS.